What if I told you a medieval peasant's field could actually gain fertility the longer he farmed it? Not because he was lucky, not because the land was untouched, because the system was designed to give back what it took. Now look at modern agriculture. 160 years of farming the American Midwest, 57 billion metric tons of topsoil, gone. It took nature 1,000 years to build an inch of that soil. We burned through it in a century and a half. Medieval farmers didn't have chemistry degrees, they didn't have satellites or government subsidies, but their dirt held strong and in many cases grew richer, while ours is dying. Here's why. Around the year 1000 CE, something changed across Europe. Farmers stopped scratching the surface of their fields with light wooden plows and started using a new tool, the caruca. The caruca was a heavy plow with an iron-tipped coulter and a mold board. It didn't just scratch the ground, it sliced into the earth and flipped the soil over, bringing air, moisture, and buried nutrients up to where roots could reach them. It could cut through heavy clay that the old scratch plows couldn't touch. It opened up vast tracts of northern Europe to cultivation for the first time. Paired with iron horseshoes and a new shoulder collar that let draft animals pull heavier loads, the caruca transformed what European soil could do. But the plow was only the beginning. The real engine was the rotation. Medieval farmers divided their land into 3 fields. Field 1 grew wheat or rye, the staple grain. Field 2 grew legumes, peas, beans, lentils, or barley and oats. Field 3 sat empty, fallow. Every year the crops rotated. The wheat field became the legume field. The legume field went fallow. The fallow field grew wheat. Now, to a modern mind, leaving a third of your farmland empty sounds wasteful. It wasn't. It was the most important field on the farm. During the fallow year, livestock grazed on the leftover stalks and weeds. They ate, they wandered, and they did what animals do. They fertilized the soil. No factory required. The sheep didn't charge for delivery. But fallow wasn't just about manure. Based on what we now understand about soil biology, that resting year would have given the underground ecosystem time to recover. Fungal networks could regrow. Earthworms could process the organic matter left behind. Rainwater would have soaked into loose, uncompacted ground instead of sheeting off a hardened surface. The field, in effect, could breathe. And when the plow returned the following spring, the earth was likely darker, softer, and more fertile than the year before. And the legumes in Field 2? They weren't just food. They were chemical engineers. Peas, beans, and lentils have a symbiotic relationship with bacteria called rhizobia that live in nodules on their roots. These bacteria pull nitrogen directly out of the atmosphere and convert it into a form plants can use: free nitrogen from the air, deposited directly into the soil. When the legume field rotated to wheat the following year, that wheat grew in nitrogen-rich earth without a single bag of fertilizer. So let me lay this out. Field 1 feeds the people. Field 2 feeds the soil. Field 3 lets the animals feed the soil while the earth rests. 3 fields working together. In a well-managed rotation, the system could put back close to what it took, and in good years, more. Not extraction, regeneration. Now, was every medieval field a paradise? No. Archaeological evidence from the Gresham College Feed Sacks project shows that as populations grew and farming expanded into marginal land, some regions did see gradual fertility decline, especially where manure was scarce or rotations were poorly managed. Farmers were often fighting to maintain what they had. But where the system was followed well, diverse crops, adequate fallow, animals cycling nutrients back, the soil could sustain production for centuries. That alone sets it apart from what came after. But we're only on the surface, literally, because the real machinery was underground. Beneath every medieval field, invisible to the farmers who worked above it, there was a network more complex than anything humans have ever engineered. Mycorrhizal fungi. The word mycorrhiza means fungus root. These organisms have existed for over 450 million years, long before humans, long before most plants evolved into what we recognize today. Here's how they work. The fungi colonize plant roots and extend hair-thin filaments called hyphae deep into the soil, far beyond where any root could reach on its own. These hyphae absorb phosphorus, nitrogen, zinc, copper, and water from pockets of soil the plant would never access. In return, the plant feeds the fungi with sugars produced by photosynthesis. Trade, pure and simple. The plant provides energy. The fungus provides reach. Neither thrives alone. Together, both flourish. But it gets deeper. When multiple plants connect to the same fungal network, they can become linked. There's evidence that resources may flow between them, that a struggling plant could receive nutrients from a healthy neighbor through the shared fungal web. Researchers sometimes call this the wood wide web. The extent of the sharing is still debated. Some scientists argue the transfers are significant, others say they may be modest, but the connections themselves are well documented. But here's the part that matters for soil. These fungi secrete a sticky glycoprotein called glomulin. Glomulin glues soil particles together into stable clumps called aggregates. These aggregates resist erosion from wind and rain. They create pore space for air and water. They trap carbon. In 1996, USDA researcher Sarah Wright published findings suggesting that as much as 1/3 of the carbon stored in soil could be associated with glomulin produced by these fungi. That estimate is still being refined, but even conservative readings point to glomulin as a major player in soil carbon storage. Medieval farmers didn't know glomulin existed. They couldn't see the fungal networks under their fields, but their farming practices, crop rotation, diverse plantings, regular fallow rest periods, animal integration, created conditions where mycorrhizal fungi could recover and thrive between disturbances. They fed the network without knowing it was there. And the network built the soil in return. Time is an ingredient. And the fungi had been perfecting this recipe for 450 million years. Nitrogen is everywhere. 78% of the air you're breathing right now is nitrogen. But plants can't use it in that form. Atmospheric nitrogen is locked behind one of the strongest chemical bonds in nature, a triple bond between two nitrogen atoms. Breaking that bond requires enormous energy. But certain soil bacteria evolved to do it for free. They convert atmospheric nitrogen into ammonium, a form plants absorb directly. The most important of these are rhizobia, bacteria that form a direct partnership with legumes. They live in small nodules on the roots of peas, beans, lentils, and clover, pulling nitrogen from the air and feeding it straight into the plant. Other organisms, like cyanobacteria, can also fix nitrogen in the soil on their own, but the legume-rhizobia partnership is the powerhouse that medieval farmers unknowingly harnessed. Every time a medieval farmer planted beans or peas in that second field, he was running a nitrogen factory. The legumes pulled nitrogen from the air, fixed it into the soil, and when the crop residue decomposed, that nitrogen became available for whatever was planted next. No energy grid, no fossil fuels, no factory, just biology doing what biology does when you let it. Now, let me give you a number that should change how you think about dirt. Here's what modern farming has done to the ground beneath your feet. It takes up to 1,000 years for nature to build 2 to 3 centimeters of topsoil. That's according to the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization. In the American Midwest alone, 57.6 billion metric tons of topsoil have eroded since farmers began tilling that land 160 years ago. Researchers at the University of Massachusetts Amherst published those findings in the journal Earth's Future. Iowa, some of the richest farmland on the planet, has lost an average of 6.8 inches of topsoil since 1850. The erosion rate is double what the USDA considers sustainable. Farmers in that region can lose 50 to 70% of their yield potential once that topsoil is gone. 1,000 years to build it, 160 to destroy it. And a senior UN Food and Agriculture Organization official warned that if current rates of degradation continue, the world's remaining topsoil could become unproductive within roughly 60 years. Now, that specific number has been debated. Some researchers argue the timeline varies enormously depending on region and soil type. But even the conservative estimates paint a picture no one should be comfortable with. Many of our most productive agricultural soils are thinning at rates that outpace any natural recovery. Well-managed medieval farms sustained their soil for centuries. Some likely improved it. We're mining ours into dust. What made the medieval system work wasn't any single technique, it was the loop. Every output became an input. Nothing left the system as waste. The grain fed the household, the straw and stubble fed the livestock over winter. The livestock manure went back onto the fields grew grain. A closed circle. And at every point in that circle, the soil received something back. Now, this wasn't romantic, it was hard. Medieval yields per acre were roughly a fifth of what modern farms produce. But here's the critical difference. Those lower yields were sustainable, in many cases for centuries. The farm in the year 1300 could still produce food on the same soil that the farm in the year 1000 had used. Where the rotation was well managed and manure was adequate, the evidence suggests that soil held its fertility, and in some cases, it's reasonable to conclude that careful stewardship left the land in better condition than it started. Modern agriculture produces 5 times the yield, but it's borrowing from the future to do it, and the bill is coming due. Monasteries across Europe refined these techniques further. They composted kitchen waste, they planted green manures, crops grown specifically to be plowed back into the soil as fertilizer. They hand-weeded to reduce competition without disturbing the earth. Historical evidence from the Gresham College Feed Sacks project confirms that by the 12th and 13th centuries, landowners were going to considerable lengths to boost soil fertility through manuring, green manures, and hand-weeding. Every practice served the same principle: feed the soil first, the soil feeds you second. Not extraction, partnership. Now let me show you what replaced it. In 1909, a German chemist named Fritz Haber figured out how to do something nature had reserved for bacteria. He broke the triple bond of atmospheric nitrogen using extreme heat, extreme pressure, and fossil fuels. A few years later, the engineer Carl Bosch scaled it into an industrial process. The first ammonia plant opened in 1913. The Haber-Bosch process. For the first time in history, humans could manufacture nitrogen fertilizer on an industrial scale, unlimited supply, disconnected from biology entirely. The International Fertilizer Association reports the process was used to produce roughly 150 million metric tons of ammonia in 2021 alone. It consumes somewhere between 1 and 2% of the world's total energy supply. Some estimates run as high as 3 to 5% of global natural gas production. And it worked spectacularly. Combined with new high-yielding crop varieties and chemical pest control, synthetic fertilizer helped triple and quadruple grain yields during the 20th century. The global population exploded from 1.6 billion in 1900 to nearly 8 billion today. Researchers estimate that nearly half the nitrogen in human tissue today originated from the Haber-Bosch process. We are, in a very real sense, made of synthetic fertilizer. Now, I'm not going to stand here and pretend the Haber-Bosch process didn't save lives. It did, billions of them, but it came with a cost nobody advertised. The Haber-Bosch process didn't just add nitrogen to the soil. It removed the reason to cycle nutrients at all. Suddenly, farms didn't need legume rotations for nitrogen. They could buy it in a bag. They didn't need livestock manure. They had ammonium nitrate. They didn't need diverse crops. They could plant corn on the same field year after year after year. The closed loop broke open, and the diversified farm became the industrial monoculture. Think about what that means. A farm that once grew wheat, barley, oats, peas, beans, and lentils across rotating fields, with cattle grazing the fallow, manure cycling back into the earth, and the soil biology humming with diversity, became a single crop operation. One species, planted on the same ground, harvested and replanted, season after season, decade after decade. The soil under a monoculture doesn't cycle, it drains. But here's the part the fertilizer companies don't put on the bag. When you flood soil with synthetic nitrogen, the bacteria that naturally fix nitrogen, the rhizobia, the cyanobacteria, stop working. Why would they? The soil is already saturated. Research reviewed by the Organic Farming Research Foundation confirms that synthetic fertilizer application suppresses the role of nitrogen-fixing bacteria and accelerates the decomposition of soil organic matter. When you dump synthetic phosphorus on the seed zone, the mycorrhizal fungi that mobilize soil phosphorus get rejected by the plant. The plant doesn't need them anymore, so the fungal networks shrink. The glomalin production drops. The soil aggregates fall apart. Research from the Rodale Institute's Farming Systems trial, running since 1978, has documented this pattern. When synthetic phosphorus is abundant, plants stop accepting mycorrhizal colonization. And when the aggregates collapse, the soil compacts. Water can't infiltrate. Roots can't breathe. Wind picks up what's loose. Rain washes away the rest. Erosion. Convenient. Fragile. You replaced a self-sustaining biological network with a chemical drip. And when the drip runs out, or the soil can't absorb it anymore, you have nothing. Analyses from the University of Illinois examined long-term farming trials, some running over a century, and found that continuous use of synthetic fertilizer without organic inputs led to significant losses in soil organic matter. The soil didn't get stronger, it got addicted. And like any addiction, the dose has to keep increasing to get the same result. Let me show you where this stands today. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, roughly 1/3 of the world's soils are already degraded, and projections suggest that over 90% could be degraded by 2050 if current practices continue. Erosion strips away an estimated 75 billion tons of topsoil every year, resulting in annual financial losses of approximately $400 billion worldwide. In sub-Saharan Africa, erosion reaches up to 100 tons per hectare annually, cutting crop yields by 30 to 50% in the worst affected areas. In Europe, 61% of soils are classified as unhealthy. In India, soil degradation affects roughly 2/3 of the country's land, and the rate of destruction dwarfs the rate of repair. Soil erosion on intensively farmed or grazed land runs 100 to 1,000 times faster than natural erosion rates. That's from the FAO's own data. A medieval farmer who followed the rotation could reasonably expect to hand his son a field still capable of feeding the next generation. A modern farmer may hand his son a field that can't grow anything without chemical life support. That's not progress, that's a countdown. The FAO estimates that the equivalent of one soccer pitch of soil is eroded every 5 seconds. Not in a century, not in a decade. One pitch, 5 seconds, around the clock. Now, before you think this is just doom, it's not, because the biology still works. The mycorrhizal networks haven't gone extinct. The nitrogen-fixing bacteria still exist. The soil food web is damaged, not dead. And there are things you can do today. 1. If you grow anything, a garden, a few containers, a patch of yard, rotate your plantings. Never grow the same crop in the same spot 2 years in a row. Plant legumes, beans, peas, clover. Let them fix nitrogen for free. And stop leaving bare soil. Cover it with mulch or a cover crop. Bare soil erodes. Covered soil builds. 2. Compost. Everything organic that leaves your kitchen can go back into the soil. Vegetable scraps, coffee grounds, eggshells, leaves. You're not throwing away waste, you're throwing away fertility. A basic compost system turns that waste into the richest soil amendment on the planet, for free. The medieval monastery understood this 800 years ago. 3. Support farmers who farm like soil matters. Regenerative agriculture, cover cropping, crop rotation, reduced tillage, livestock integration, these aren't niche practices. They're the medieval model with modern understanding. Research from the Rodale Institute's farming systems trial, running since 1978, has found that biological approaches using rotation, cover crops, and organic amendments match or exceed conventional yields after the 4th year and outperform them during drought years. You don't need 100 acres, you need a shift in thinking. Stop treating soil like a sponge to squeeze. Start treating it like a partner to feed. 2 handfuls of dirt. This one is alive. Billions of organisms per teaspoon. Fungi, bacteria, nematodes, protozoa. A network older than any civilization. It holds water, it holds carbon, it holds the future of every plant that touches it. This one is substrate. It holds chemicals until the rain washes them into the nearest river. One was built by 1,000 years of biology. The other was gutted by 160 years of industry. Medieval farmers didn't have microscopes. They didn't know the word mycorrhizal. They couldn't measure nitrogen fixation rates or soil organic carbon percentages. But they understood a principle modern agriculture forgot. You don't feed the plant, you feed the soil. The soil feeds everything else. That was the contract, the oldest contract in farming, older than money, older than writing, older than any empire that ever rose and fell. Take care of the ground, and the ground takes care of you. Break the contract, and you eat well for a generation, maybe 2, and then you eat nothing at all. Old ways aren't nostalgia, they're biology that worked when survival depended on it. If you learned something today, subscribe. Share this with someone who grows things, even if it's just a windowsill herb. Because the dirt matters, and it's running out.